You spend your whole life being pulled in 100 directions. People's expectations, society's opinions, the noise from the outside world telling you who you should be, what success should look like, what path is acceptable. And in the middle of all that chaos, you lose the most powerful force you've got. You, not the version you present to fit in, not the mask you wear to be liked. I'm talking about the real, raw, unstoppable you, the one buried under layers of approval, seeking self, doubt, and distraction. That version of you isn't weak. That version doesn't need validation. That version is the source of your true power, and until you reconnect with it, you will keep spinning your wheels in places that drain your energy. Chasing things that don't fulfill you, you want breakthrough. You want momentum, you want to feel fire in your gut again, then stop outsourcing your worth. Stop looking for permission to rise. The turning point comes when you get radically honest about what you want, what you value, and where you're going. The world will always have opinions. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand you. Let them laugh. Because while they're distracted judging your growth, you'll be too focused building it. Power doesn't come from being everything for everyone. It comes from alignment, from clarity, from choosing to show up for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's lonely, even when it feels like no one else gets it. That's the point. It's not their journey to get. It's yours to claim when you finally stop chasing people, trends, and approval and start turning your focus inward. That's when the shift happens. That's when you stop surviving and start creating. That's when you stop performing and start living. That's where the real power begins. Most people are walking around craving something they don't even recognize. They're starving for significance, but looking for it in all the wrong places. They're trapped in a loop of needing to be seen, liked, and validated by people who often don't even know themselves. You scroll, you compare, you adjust yourself to fit into someone else's idea of worth. And somewhere in that process, you begin to abandon your own power. You start dimming your light just to be accepted by people who aren't even paying attention. You keep asking, do they approve of me? Instead of asking, do I approve of me? That question right there shifts everything. Because the moment you stop outsourcing your value is the moment you begin the real work. The moment you say no more and start reconnecting with the fire inside you. That's when you become unstoppable. You were not born to fit in. You were born to lead yourself, to build from within, to cultivate an unshakable mindset that doesn't need applause to move forward. The greatest leaders, the real champions of life, the people who live with intensity and joy, they're not chasing approval. They're chasing growth, truth, alignment. And that starts with getting radically honest about the fact that you've been giving your power away. You've been waiting on permission to be great, waiting on someone else to say you're enough. You don't need permission, you never did. The truth is, your inner world creates your outer world, and if you don't take back control of your inner world, then someone else always will. You've got to learn to sit in silence long enough to hear your own voice again. You've got to disconnect from the noise and reconnect with your soul. Because what's the point of gaining the world's attention if you lose yourself in the process? What's the point of applause if your own heart isn't in it? You weren't meant to perform. You were meant to transform. And that transformation begins when you cut the ties with needing validation and build a relationship with your higher self. The self that already knows what to do. The self that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't shrink. The self that decides, acts, moves, and I get it. It's hard to let go of needing that approval. It feels like rejection. It feels like isolation. But what if that's the price of real freedom? What if solitude is sacred space, not punishment? What if the disconnection from them is actually a reconnection to you? The longer you look outside for what can only be found inside, the more lost you'll feel. But the second you realize that everything you've ever needed has been waiting on you to stop looking away from yourself, that's when you take your power back. That's when the breakthrough happens, not in the noise, but in the stillness. Your truth doesn't need to be validated, it needs to be lived. That's where confidence is born, from doing the work in silence, from choosing integrity over popularity, from choosing purpose over performance. The more you honor that truth, the more the world begins to move around you. People feel it when someone owns their path. They feel it when someone no longer flinches at criticism, and that only happens when you've built a foundation within yourself so strong that no external opinion can shake it. When you look in the mirror and finally say, "I've got me," everything begins to shift. Don't just seek motivation, build identity. Identity drives behavior, and identity is shaped by the choices you make when no one's watching. When you say no to what doesn't serve you, when you turn off the noise and tune into your mission, when you choose growth over comfort, vision over distraction, self-respect over likes, that's when you rise. Not because someone clapped for you, but because you decided that your life matters enough to lead yourself. Because you are no longer available for being a watered-down version of who you were meant to be. Every single person alive has a choice. You can either live by design or live by default. Most people, they're sleepwalking through their own lives, reacting to everything, driven by the opinions of others, their past mistakes, their fears, their limitation. They're not creating life. They're tolerating it. They wake up and immediately start responding to noise. Their phone buzzes, their email pings, someone says something negative, and suddenly their entire emotional state is hijacked. That's not living, that's surviving. That's not owning your life. That's giving it away one distraction at a time. You cannot dominate your life if you're always playing defense. You've got to wake up with intention. You've got to design every day like it matters, because it does. The real players in this world, the people who are shaping their future instead of being shaped by it, they don't wait for clarity. They create it. They decide who they want to become and then reverse. Engineer their life to make that identity non-negotiable. If you're not intentional, the world will hand you a script, and you'll live out a role you never auditioned for. You'll wake up at 40, 50, 60 years old and realize you lived everyone else's expectations instead of your own vision. That's why you have to interrupt the pattern. You have to shake yourself awake. Because every day you let pass without a plan is a day someone else can influence your direction, your energy, your focus. Living by design means you've identified your standards and refuse to operate beneath them. You no longer let comfort seduce you into mediocrity. You stop negotiating with your potential. You start leading yourself like your life depends on it, because it does. That means you create your rituals, your non-negotiables, your vision, your rules. You don't just make a to-do list. You build a must-do identity. You set your internal thermostat and refuse to let your environment drag you down. People who live by design aren't easily swayed, because they've already decided what they're committed to. They've already drawn a line in the sand and said, "This is who I am now. This is what I do. This is how I live." When you live by default, life owns you. When you live by design, you own life. And owning life starts with owning your mornings, your mindset, your mission. You don't stumble into greatness. You don't accidentally become disciplined. You don't casually transform your life. These things happen because you built them, moment by moment, decision by decision, with a ruthless commitment to your purpose. You don't need 100 opportunities. You need clarity and consistency. You need to shut down the distractions and build momentum, brick by brick, with your habits, your focus, your energy. Most people are addicted to reacting because it feels urgent. But urgency is not the same as importance. You've got to stop reacting to the moment and start responding to your mission. That means cutting off the noise. That means eliminating what doesn't align with where you're going. That means designing a life that reflects the best of who you are, not the leftovers of who you were. People think discipline is hard. You know what's harder: regret. Living a life that was never truly yours. Waking up and realizing you played it safe and stayed small because you never stopped long enough to design something better. You don't get confidence from motivation. You get it from alignment. When your daily actions reflect your vision, confidence becomes the byproduct. You walk different, talk different, move different, because you know you're building something real. You're not waiting for inspiration. You've become it. You're not looking for signs. You're making decisions. That's the difference. That's the edge. That's how you build a life you don't need to escape from. A life that reflects your highest values, not your lowest fears. Designing your life means you're willing to let go of what's no longer serving you, even if it's familiar. Familiar doesn't mean effective. Safe doesn't mean fulfilling. Just because you've been doing something for years doesn't mean it belongs in your next chapter. You've got to ask yourself hard questions. What am I tolerating? What am I pretending not to know? Where am I living below my potential just because it's comfortable? Those questions expose the truth, and the truth is your starting point. The truth is the doorway to power, but only if you have the courage to walk through it. Most people are waiting for external validation before they make a move. They're waiting for someone to pat them on the back, give them permission, tell them they're good enough. But let me tell you something. If you're waiting for the world to give you a green light, you'll be waiting forever. Growth doesn't happen when you're looking around for applause. It happens when you finally realize the only person who needs to believe in your potential is you. That shift from external validation to internal alignment is the most powerful transformation you'll ever make. You've got to understand, opinions are cheap. They're thrown around by people who are too scared to chase their own dreams, so they try to anchor you to their level, but your vision wasn't given to them. It was given to you. That means it's your responsibility to protect it, nurture it, and fight for it, even when nobody else understands. Especially when nobody else understands. Because that's the moment you begin building self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of personal power. When you stop outsourcing your worth and start owning your direction, you become unstoppable. Now, this isn't about being arrogant. It's about recognizing that your life can't be lived through the lens of someone else's insecurities. If you let their doubts define your decisions, you'll build a life full of regret. You'll shape your actions around avoiding judgment rather than chasing greatness. And greatness demands you go where others won't. It requires you to walk alone sometimes, misunderstood, judged, criticized, not because you're wrong, but because you dared to be different, because you're committed to growth, not comfort. Growth is uncomfortable because it demands sacrifice. You're going to have to let go of the need to be liked, the desire to fit in, the safety of being agreeable. If you're addicted to approval, you're a prisoner to other people's limitations. But the moment you stop seeking their acceptance, you create space to accept yourself fully. And that's when the shift happens. That's when your energy starts changing. That's when you start moving different. Because you're no longer playing to the crowd. You're playing to your calling. Most people don't realize how much energy they're leaking every day just trying to be someone they're not. Smiling when they're hurt. Saying yes when they mean no. Playing small so someone else can feel big. That's not kindness, that's self-abandonment, and you can't grow while abandoning yourself. At some point, you've got to draw the line. You've got to say, this is who I am, this is what I value, this is where I'm going, and not with arrogance, but with unshakable clarity. Because clarity creates power, and power isn't about control, it's about alignment. The more you align with who you truly are, the less noise you hear from the outside. You stop overthinking every decision. You stop analyzing every opinion. You stop dimming your light because someone else isn't ready to shine. And that's when your real journey begins. Not the one you perform for others. The one that's rooted in truth. The one that's driven by purpose, not applause. That's when your results shift, your mindset shifts, your circle shifts. Because when you operate from alignment, you attract people, opportunities, and outcomes that match your frequency. But it all starts with the decision to stop living for their approval. Because their approval will never be enough if you don't approve of yourself. You could be the most talented, brilliant, creative person in the room, and still feel like a fraud if your worth is tied to what someone else thinks. That's the trap. That's the prison. And you break free by shifting your focus inward. By asking better questions. What lights me up? What do I want to create? What does success mean to me, not to them, to me? Because when you define success for yourself, you stop running their race and start building your own legacy. You don't get stronger by staying in the same room with the same people having the same conversations about the same excuses. Growth demands disruption. It demands separation from anything and anyone that keeps you locked in old patterns. And that's not always going to feel good. It's not supposed to. Because the moment you start growing, you automatically outgrow things. Old habits, old environments, old relationships that once felt comfortable. Suddenly they start feeling heavy. Not because you're better than them, but because you're becoming better than the version of you that tolerated them. When you're deeply committed to evolving, you start noticing how much energy is drained by trying to stay loyal to who you used to be. You feel the weight of holding up old identities just to make other people feel safe. You pretend you're still okay with mediocrity, with surface-level conversations, with plans that never go anywhere. And inside, something begins to shift, not because you're ungrateful, but because you're finally honest about what you want, honest about what you deserve, honest about who you're becoming, and that honesty becomes the beginning of your freedom. But freedom always comes with a cost. The cost is letting go. The cost is walking away from comfort. The cost is being willing to walk alone if that's what it takes to stay aligned, because the path to your next level is rarely crowded. Not because others aren't capable, but because most people aren't willing. They're not willing to confront themselves. They're not willing to face discomfort. They're not willing to sacrifice short-term approval for long-term fulfillment. But you decided to step into the unknown. You decided to leave behind the small talk, the fake smiles, the shallow validation. You decided that your life required more than what you were settling for. And that decision changed everything. You see, there's a point in the journey where you stop trying to convince anyone of your worth. You stop explaining your vision to people who don't even have goals. You stop apologizing for wanting more, not because you're angry, but because you're focused, and focus is clarity. Focus is power. Focus says, I don't need to be understood. I need to be aligned. That's where true growth begins. When you stop chasing connection that comes at the cost of your evolution. When you stop watering dead plants hoping they'll bloom again. When you realize your energy is too sacred to be wasted on circles that don't grow. And yes, that's going to trigger people. It's going to confuse them, because the version of you that tolerated nonsense is gone. The version of you that shrank for acceptance, that played it safe to be liked. That version doesn't exist anymore. What exists now is someone who sees their worth clearly. Someone who understands that growth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's silent. It's you saying no to things you used to say yes to. It's you spending time alone, reflecting, realigning. It's you showing up consistently, not for recognition, but for transformation. There's a sacred kind of power that comes from choosing yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a self-respecting way. When you choose your peace over chaos. When you choose progress over popularity, when you choose alignment over attachment, that's not weakness, that's mastery. That's the mark of someone who's not just interested in growth. They're committed to it. Fully, relentlessly, unapologetically, and that kind of commitment doesn't need permission. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need applause. It just needs a decision. A real one. One where you burn the bridges back to who you used to be, not out of resentment, but out of reverence for who you're becoming. Growth will always require isolation at some point. Not forever, but for a season. A season where you stop listening to outside noise and start tuning into your own frequency. A season where your habits become non-negotiable, your boundaries become sacred, and your time becomes protected. You start moving different. You stop explaining yourself. You stop showing up to places that drain your soul. You stop engaging in conversations that lead nowhere, not because you're cold, but because you're clear. And clarity is your superpower. It allows you to filter out what no longer serves the future you're creating. There's a powerful shift that happens when you realize you are no longer living to meet the expectations of others. For most of your life, you've been trained to seek approval Approval from parents, teachers, friends, social media, society. Somewhere along the line, your identity got tangled in the applause. You started measuring your worth based on likes, validation, recognition. And every time someone didn't agree with your path, you questioned yourself. Every time you were criticized, you held back. You played it small. You edited your voice. You filtered your truth. You started living a life that pleased others but suffocated your soul. And then comes that moment, call it a breakdown, a breakthrough, or a quiet realization, when you finally ask yourself, what am I doing this for? Who am I trying to impress? Who am I living for? Because if it's not for you, it will never be enough. There's no award, no praise, no external validation that can fill the void of self-abandonment. If you're not aligned with your own purpose, if you're not living from a place of internal truth, everything you accomplish will still feel hollow. Because real power doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being real, and being real is messy. It's not polished. It's not always pretty. It's not designed for mass approval, but it's honest. It's raw. It's you showing up, not with a mask, but with integrity. You don't need to perform anymore. You don't need to play a role just to be accepted. You need to own your story, all of it. The wins, the failures, the pain, the growth. Because once you own it, no one can weaponize it against you. Once you stop hiding, you stop fearing, and when fear disappears, power enters. The reason most people feel stuck is because they've built their identity around someone else's script. They're living someone else's version of success, someone else's rules, someone else's timelines, and they wonder why they feel disconnected, frustrated, exhausted. It's because they've outsourced their worth to opinions that don't even matter. That's the trap, chasing external approval in hopes that one day it will feel like enough, but it never does. Because approval is addictive. The more you get, the more you need, and the second it's taken away, your confidence crumbles. So if your power depends on what others think of you, you're never really in control. But when you shift from approval, seeking to authenticity, living, everything changes. You stop asking for permission to be yourself. You stop diluting your truth to make people comfortable. You stop making yourself small in rooms where your soul is screaming to be heard. Because now you understand something deeper. You understand that not everyone is meant to get you. Not everyone is supposed to support you, and that's not rejection. It's redirection. It's the universe clearing space for people who align with the real you, not the version of you you've been pretending to be. And that kind of alignment is powerful. It's magnetic. You attract different things when you operate from truth. Opportunities show up. Relationships deepen. Creativity flows. Energy multiplies. Because you're no longer leaking power trying to fit in. You're standing fully in your lane, owning your path, and unapologetically walking in your purpose. That's when life starts to feel expansive. That's when fulfillment kicks in, not from having more, but from being more. More of your truth, more of your potential, more of your real self, and yes, not everyone will celebrate your growth. Some people liked you better when you were easy to control, when you kept your mouth shut, when you said yes to everything, when you stayed predictable. But growth makes you unpredictable. It makes you bold. It makes you a threat to the status quo. That's why people resist your evolution. It reflects the parts of themselves they're unwilling to face. But that's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to stay rooted in your truth, regardless of how others respond. Because truth isn't loud, but it's unshakable. When you finally make the decision to prioritize your growth over their opinions, a different version of you starts to emerge. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop needing validation and start demanding results. Most people are reactive. They wait for someone to tell them they're good enough before they take action. They wait for the perfect timing, the perfect situation, the perfect support system. And guess what? They end up waiting their entire lives. But the people who transform, the ones who shift the trajectory of their existence, don't wait for external confirmation. They move, they act, they execute, not because they're fearless, but because they're done being shackled by fear. You can't grow if you're constantly adjusting your pace based on who's watching. You can't evolve if you keep shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. Every time you hesitate to speak your truth, you disconnect from your power, Every time you ask, what will they think? You are feeding the very prison you're trying to escape. Because the opinions of others are infinite, and if you live for their applause, you will die from their silence. The only way to build something unbreakable is to build it from within. That means doing the deep, uncomfortable work. That means letting go of attachments to people, titles, identities that no longer align with the highest version of who you are becoming. And let's get something straight. Growth is brutal. It's not motivational posters and smooth affirmations. It's tearing down every version of yourself that was built to survive and replacing it with a version that's designed to thrive. You'll outgrow friendships. You'll lose relationships that once felt like forever. You'll be misunderstood, judged, laughed at, and it's all part of the process. Because the more you grow, the fewer people you'll relate to. That doesn't make you arrogant. That makes you focused. The climb is not crowded because most people would rather stay comfortable in confusion than face the clarity that comes with commitment. There's a cost to staying stuck. It's not just time. It's your identity, your energy, your dreams. Every day you choose comfort over courage, you're slowly abandoning the person you were born to become. And deep down you know it, you can feel it. That restless energy that whispers, "This isn't it." That inner voice that keeps pulling you to something bigger. But here's the deal. No one's coming to rescue you. No one's going to knock on your door and give you permission to go all in on yourself. You have to give yourself that permission. You have to be the one who decides, I'm done playing small. I'm done explaining myself. I'm done diluting my purpose for the sake of their comfort. This level of self-leadership changes everything. You stop waiting to be chosen and start choosing yourself. You stop chasing approval and start chasing alignment. And you realize that discipline isn't punishment. It's freedom. Focus isn't sacrifice. It's power. Sacrificing short-term pleasure for long-term greatness isn't loss. It's the highest form of self-respect. The reason most people never reach their potential is because they keep negotiating with their limitations. They treat their excuses like facts, but your excuses are not the truth. They're just the most comfortable lies you keep telling yourself. You want transformation, then stop talking about it and start acting like it. Get obsessed, not with being seen, but with building something that can't be ignored. Get ruthless about your boundaries. Get serious about your time. Protect your energy like your life depends on it, because it does. You don't need to be liked to be successful. You need to be clear. You need to be committed. You need to be relentless in the pursuit of your highest potential. And yes, that means walking alone sometimes. That means being the only one in the room who believes in your vision. That means putting in reps when no one is watching, when no one is cheering, when no one even understands what you're doing. But here's the beautiful part. The more you honor that version of you, the more magnetic your energy becomes. The more powerful your presence becomes. Because you're no longer operating from insecurity, you're operating from conviction. You're not bending to fit into the mold. They're forced to adjust to your standard. You are no longer apologizing for your ambition. You are no longer dimming your fire just to be digestible. You are here to lead, to rise, to dominate. Not because it's easy, but because you're no longer willing to settle for anything less than everything you're capable of becoming.